I'm having a hard time finding time to film these days. Hey BookTube, it's Kim at Middle of the Book March, and today's video is about prize-winning books that I either loved or hated. So what I did is took my trusty notebook and I went through different book prizes in the past, well, I don't know, decades. And I pulled out 4 of the bigger prizes and picked 2 books that I really loved and 1 book that I hated from each of them. And I'm going to tell you the years that they won the prizes and what I felt about them, because I think it's not maybe important, but it's interesting to remember that we're not going to like every single prize-winning book, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us as readers, but we each have our own taste. We each look for something different in the books that we read. And even if a book won the Pulitzer or the Women's Prize, the two of the prizes I'm going to talk about, even if it's a prize-winning #1 book, that doesn't mean that everyone is going to like it. And yeah, and plenty of them I didn't like, and for one reason or another, and let me just get going and I'll tell you why. So the first prize I looked at was the Pulitzer, and I tend to get along really well with Pulitzer Prize winning books, or books that are long-listed or short-listed. So I picked 2 Pulitzer winning books that I loved, and 1 that I didn't love. So let me show you some of the books that I absolutely loved. The first 2, these are 2 of my favorite books of all time, and they both won the Pulitzer. Let's see. The first one, as I have gushed over and over again for several years, is Now in November by Josephine Johnson. This was published in 1934, and she won the Pulitzer. I believe this is her first only novel. She was, I think, the youngest to ever win, and she was 28. She's in her 20s. This is an amazing, beautiful, heart-rendering, traumatic, sublime book. This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and I have read it several times, and it's a very short book. This is like a Shorty September kind of a book. I even read the afterword and have tons of highlights and everything in the afterword. But the book itself is only about 164 pages in this particular copy. It is just an absolutely glorious book. It's about a family middle-class family driven to poverty by the Depression, trying to make their way by farming and owning their property, and things just don't work out. And a family with 3 daughters. It's just absolutely sublime of a novel, and absolutely loved it. The next one is, this won the Pulitzer in 1986, and it is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. I read this book for my book group in real life, and we thought, why would we read a Western? But it was actually my turn to bring the selections that we vote on every month. And I brought this book with 2 other Pulitzer Prize winning books. And we picked this one. I don't know why, but every single one of us absolutely loved it. And I adore this book. I love Larry McMurtry's writing. This is a book about Gus and Carl, who are 2 former Texas Rangers in the 19th century. They are best friends, and they are on a cross-country cattle drive with a bunch of other cowboys. Why would I be interested in that? It was awesome. It was so beautifully written. It was the best story, one of the best friendship road trip stories. There's no driving, and it's all horses, but just the cross-country shenanigans and violence and plot with just beautiful character-driven writing. Absolutely loved it. I highly recommend this. You don't have to be a Western lover to love Lonesome Dove. Please pick it up. Yeah, it's a big book, but it's like reading The Count of Monte Cristo. It's a huge book, but it flies, and it's just so amazing to read. Now, what's the book I hated? Pulitzer Prize winning book that I really didn't like is The Overstory by Richard Powers, which won in 2019. Wasn't that long ago. It took me 2 weeks to read this book, and I had such high hopes because the very first chapter is absolutely gorgeous, in my opinion, about the American chestnut tree. This is a story about trees and people and their interaction with nature and trees. It started off so wonderful, and then it just got weird and bloated and pretentious and weird. I think I said that twice, but I really disliked this book, and I hated that it took me so long to read it because I wasn't looking forward to picking it up. 2 weeks, people, 2 weeks. I did not like The Overstory. There's Chowder. Next, we go on to the Booker Prize. This is another big, giant book prize. And I love this. I absolutely love this book. This won the Booker in 1989. This is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. And this is the story of a butler. It's the story of a butler. It's a compelling portrait of the perfect English butler and of his fading insular world to post-war England. He's been a butler in service for 3 decades at Darlington Hall. And he goes on a cross-country drive, something he never had the opportunity or time to do during his decades of service, because the estate that he's working on is changing hands. And he goes on a road trip, meets a lot of interesting people, but it's just a quiet, beautiful, poignant story, and it's highly recommend. This is another short one. I highly recommend this. It's beautiful. It's character driven. It's quiet and just excellent. Wonderful writing, Ishiguro's writing. The next one, this is the winner of the Booker Prize in 2018. One of the first, I think this was the year before I came onto BookTube, and this is Milkman by Anna Burns. I don't know if I would have ever discovered this book had it not been for BookTube and the Booker Prize, but this is the story of our unnamed teenage narrator in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. And this is a young woman who reads and walks through her neighborhood at the same time. And even though she's walking through her village on the sidewalks, she is constantly coming upon soldiers on either side of the divide in Northern Ireland. She has her nose in a book as she's walking down the street for escape. So she's looked down on by her neighbors, she is followed, she is spied on, and the milkman, who is a soldier, starts to stalk her, and he's much, much older than her. But this book is filled with things that I learned about Northern Ireland and the Troubles. But this is a polarizing book because the entire book is written in stream of consciousness style. There's no chapters. There are no names of anybody, and the tangents are everywhere. They go off all over the place, but I absolutely loved it. It is polarizing because I think you either love it or hate it. I absolutely loved it. I thought her writing was brilliant. Her characters and her plot were brilliant, and nobody can convince me otherwise. I absolutely loved Milkman. This one, let's see. So those are the 2 in the Booker Prize that I loved. What was the one that I hated? Oh, I reviewed this early on. I think it was my first year on BookTube, and I reviewed this book. One of the worst pieces of fiction is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, winner in 2019. Bernadine Evaristo got ripped off. Her novel, Girl, Woman, Other, was fantastic. And she had to share the prize with Margaret Atwood for The Testaments. Margaret Atwood, as an author, is brilliant. The Handmaid's Tale is spectacular, and one of the books I've read multiple times. And The Testaments was a continuation of The Handmaid's Tale. It was a continuation of the story. But I used to describe it as Margaret Atwood's fan fiction to herself. And it pandered to the television show, The Handmaid's Tale. It continued the story at the very end of The Handmaid's Tale, and it wrapped up the story in the life of June. The The ending of The Handmaid's Tale was incredible and brilliant, and The Handmaid's Tale is so wonderfully written. I didn't want the Testaments to turn out like it did. And I was pissed because I went to the bookstore on release day to buy it brand new and go home and read it, and I just hated my reading experience. The Handmaid's Tale stands on its own. It did not need a sequel. It did not need to be wrapped up in a bow, happily ever after, the end. And I really resented it. Okay, enough of that. The next prize is the National Book Award. And let me see. The first book, I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm bending. Here it is. Sorry. The big giant hardcover fell over and knocked the tripod. This book I love this book. I've read this multiple times. This was one of the first books that I read as an older teenager that launched me into reading books marketed for adults. And this is one of my favorite books of all time. This won the National Book Award in 1980. It is The World According to Garp by John Irving. And I don't know, this is very much due for a reread. Absolutely love this. John Irving has a very quirky style, writes really weird characters and very weird plot lines, just crazy stories. And, but it works. And not every book of his has worked for me. This one is spectacular. It's a Kim book all the way. Absolutely love it. It's basically Garp's life, and it's weird and quirky and weird some more, and I keep saying that, but it's just so brilliantly written. The very first sentence in the book: Garp's mother, Jenny Fields, was arrested in Boston in 1942 for wounding a man in a movie theater. It just goes on from there. It is so original and unique and funny and maddening all at the same time, but I absolutely loved it. And I love John Irving's writing. This is going to come as no surprise, but my next favorite prize-winning book, the National Book Award that won, is James by Percival Everett. This was the most recent 2024 National Book Award winner. It's a brilliant book. It's a retelling of Jim from Huckleberry Finn. You do not need to read Huckleberry Finn to love James. It is Percival Everett always has something important to say in his fiction, always has something to comment on. Absolutely no exception. He talks about slavery. He talks about Jim Crow. He talks about the characters from Huckleberry Finn. And he's a genius. He's an absolute genius. So don't hesitate to read this if you have not read Huckleberry Finn. Just go and read James. What's the book that I didn't love that won the National Book Award? Not only did I not love this, I have a burning white-hot hatred for this book, and I DNF'd it, but I am going to talk about it. I read enough to hate it this much. It's Paris Trout by Pete Dexter. It won the National Book Award in 1988. Oh, this is one of the scummiest, sleaziest, most violent, sociopathic characters that I've ever encountered in literature. And if it was just because of that, I probably would have enjoyed the book. I would have read it. But this book is so gratuitously violent and racist and misogynistic that I couldn't help but thinking, this is not just the character, this is how the author feels. And there is such a violent, gratuitous scene of rape, of Paris Trout raping his wife, that it was so gross and so inexcusable, and so unnecessary as a plot point to put it in this book. And there were other things, parts of the plot from there that I thought, this is just heinous. And it didn't lead anything to the writing of the book, and the writing wasn't that great anyway. But one of the books I DNF'd that I absolutely hated and had to mention. The last two are from the Women's Prize, and the first one won the Women's Prize in 2012. This is Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles. I bet she thought I was going to say Circe, but no, it was Circe is a lot more recent than this one. I love The Song of Achilles. This is the retelling of the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus, his constant companion. It is so beautiful. It is such a wonderful story of a relationship between two men, whether you believe it's a love relationship or not. It is a gorgeous story, so well written. Madeline Miller has the credentials. She's a classicist and a lover of classic literature and classic mythology. I just adore this book. It is just so, it's fun, but it's also so intelligently written. And it's, I don't know. She says on the back, she says, I have loved ancient Greece since I was 5, and my mother began reading me the Greek myths. I was enthralled by the larger-than-life gods, the epic adventures, and most particularly the stories of the Trojan War with its noble and deeply flawed heroes. It's all in here. It's all in here, and it's such a beautiful story, and she's such a great writer. The next one won the Women's Prize in 2020, and this is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Again, early on in my booktube career, this was one of my favorite novels. It made me cry a couple of times, and I don't often cry at novels. I haven't for years, but this was one of them. And not only is the story incredible, but it is so beautifully written. It is so expertly done. She reimagines the life of Shakespeare, but she never mentions his name in here. This is the story of Agnes, his wife. And there is a part in the book about a flea, the journey of a flea. It is genius. And I love Hamnet. I love the story. I love her writing. Maggie O'Farrell is a master, and highly recommend. I highly recommend all the ones that I loved, but not the ones that I hated. And the last one is not necessarily one I hated, but this was just okay for me, so I really hated that it won the prize. It won 2 prizes. It won the Women's Prize, and I believe the National Book Award, if I remember correctly. Yes, the National Book Award in 2023, and that is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This was an okay book for me, but it got such glowing praise in all different directions, professionally and on BookTube and critically and commercially. It was fine. It was fine. But Barbara Kingsolver over the years has gotten extremely preachy. And she's writing about Appalachia and the opioid epidemic. And our hero protagonist is Demon Copperhead. And it is a reimagining of David Copperfield, of Charles Dickens. But I don't know. It was overwritten. It was presumptuous. It was preachy, very much so. It was, excuse me, it was too much. And the way that she wrote Demon, the dialogue and the thoughts that were in his head, the inner monologue, it didn't fit the age of the character as he gets older. It just did not fit what a character of that age and life situation would say or do. So I just resented the book. I did finish it. I read the whole thing, and it was okay. It was fine. It was just fine. But it was a prize winner, and I didn't love that. So those are the prizes that I looked at. Those are the books I loved and kind of hated. Let me know in the comments below if you have opinions different from mine or what you thought about everything that I said, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.